Welcome back to Global History and Geography. We'll be covering Chapter 5 today, Imperialism. I hope you have your fill-in guide out. Let's get started. What were the main causes of imperialism? Well, there's our old friends, political, social, and economic again. So, political, what is going on? We just spent some time industrializing all of our countries. We are looking outward for power, security. The more in imperialism, the more countries, the more colonies that your country had, the more powerful that you were seen. Bases were needed for trade outposts, and also bases to park all of these countries' large navies were needed as well. Nationalism also played a significant role in imperialism. Again, it's that belief that that pride for one's country and the fact that you needed to spread your country's way of life outside to other colonies. Socially, there were two things going on in imperialism: white man's burden and social Darwinism. And basically, these two ideas had to do with spreading Western civilization and Christianity to the non European, non white parts of the world. Economically, again, the Industrial Revolution just finished. There was a big need for natural resources in order to keep manufacturing products. There was also a need for new markets to sell those products to overseas. There was also a population boom during industrialization, and these European countries that industrialize are going to need to find new places for their population, their growing population, to live. Scientifically, there were new medicines, again, as a result of industrialization, things like germ theory, antiseptics, surgeries, and new military technology, new Navy ships, cannons, guns, new types of rifles that are going to help effectively advance these countries to look outward and to take over other outside regions. Forms of new imperialism. So, all of these European countries didn't really follow the same form of rule. So, we're going to go over them now. There was obviously direct rule, which was something that you kind of saw in old imperialism in the 1500s, where the parent country created colonies, ruled directly. You can see that through France and like Algeria, parts of Western Africa. Great Britain started the protectorate system, which is essentially indirect rule through local rulers. So you would keep the local rulers in place, and then they would administer basically the region that's being imperialized, and the parent country would control that local ruler and basically behind the scenes give them the orders. Um, an economic type of imperialism would be sphere of influence, and this particularly has to do with investment trading. And in a sphere of influence, if a country has a sphere of influence, they have exclusive investment and trading rights in that colony. And China is your best example for that. Great Britain, France, the United States, Japan, Russia all had spheres of influence in China during the age of imperialism. Let's get to some case studies. So, we're going to start with India, and the British imperialized India. However, initially, the British East India Company, a trading company, controlled most of India, and they gained this control due to the decline of the Mughal Empire starting around the 1700s. In 1857, the sepoys, those are Indian soldiers that were working for the British East India Company, will start a mutiny, a rebellion, and try to kick the British East India Company out of India. Their rebellion, their mutiny, will be crushed by the British around 1858, and then that will lead the British Parliament to end rule in India by the British East India Company. And this will be the start of the British Raj, the British having total control over India, and it will last quite a long time, almost 100 years. India will be known as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. There'll be a big market for British goods. There'll be cotton plantations set up in India because the climate and the soil there was conducive for that. Tea plantations, tea is going to become a significant drink in England due to its imperialism of India. And the British will also improve the infrastructure, creating roads, railroads, will bring education to India as well. What are some negative impacts, though, of this imperialism? India is going to lose a lot of their resources. A lot of their natural resources will be sent to Britain for industrialization, creating goods to sell back to India for a profit. Um, and these farms, again, are going to focus on selling cash crops instead of food. So it's going to lead to hunger and starvation of a lot of Indian people. Indians will also be treated as second class citizens in the British Raj. They will be kept out of the local governments. They'll be basically kept on the lower end of the social and economic spectrum in favor of British people. British made goods will be exclusively sold in India, and these will replace the local goods and basically put the local businesses, the local Indian businesses, out of work. So, some positives, some negatives. Let's get to imperialism in Africa. So, Africa is going to be a bit of a special case because they will be divided up. The continent will be divided at the Berlin Conference in 1884. And basically, this was a meeting where all of the European nations, all of those nations that you see on the picture on the right, met at Berlin in Germany, divided Africa, and set rules for colonization. They did this to try and avoid going to war with each other over Africa, but I will tell you right now that they're still going to fight with each other over Africa. And this event is also known as the Scramble for Africa. Interesting to note that no Africans were invited to the Berlin Conference. See if you can figure out maybe why the Europeans might have wanted to leave Africans out of this whole thing. And as a result of this, the continent will be divided up without any regard for religious, social, cultural distinctions in Africa. It's just going to be carved up like a cake, basically, and the European nations will start to move in to the continent as a result. Let's look at South Africa. South Africa was actually settled by Dutch farmers. They were known as Boers in the 1600s. So before new imperialism took place, the Dutch were in South Africa. However, in 1806, the British are going to acquire Cape Colony in South Africa, and this is going to lead to conflict between the British and the Dutch later on. How about the indigenous people in South Africa, though? Well, in the 1800s, the Zulu Empire will get created by the emperor of the Zulu. His name was Shaka Zulu, and he's going to unite the different African groups in South Africa to create the Zulu nation. And the Zulus are going to resist British and Dutch imperialism, and initially they're going to win battles against both the British and the Dutch, and they will be able to hold them off from imperializing the entire region for a short time. However, eventually the British will defeat the Zulus, only because they had superior weapons technology. They had rifles, they had cannons. The Zulus, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, that is a recreation of a battle between the British and the Zulus. Zulus had shields, spears, swords, but nothing really compared to like the Enfield rifle, the cannons that the British had at the time. So, but it's important for you to note that, yes, there was resistance by Africans. Use the Zulus as a good example of that. But what about the British and the Dutch? They're going to fight a war with each other in the 1890s. and it will be over basically the exclusive rights to develop South Africa. So the war is started by Cecil Rhodes. He's that guy in the political cartoon on the lower right hand side, and he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He wished to create a railroad that connected Egypt, another British colony, to South Africa. So you can kind of see that he's got his 2 feet kind of spanning the entire continent of Africa. He's got the wires in his hands, and he's basically, his intention is to kind of link these colonies somehow. In reality, he wanted to do it with the railroad, and in order to do this, they had to annex other Boer republics that had surrounded Cape Colony. Well, the Dutch did not want to be annexed by the British. They wanted to retain their self rule. Ultimately, though, the Dutch are going to fight against the British. The British will win again, much like with the Zulus. They just had better firepower. And an impact of this war is basically the Boers and the British are going to hate each other because of this conflict. However, Britain's still going to kind of get what it wants and create the Union of South Africa. So Britain will ultimately acquire control of that region of Africa. Let's move on to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is unique in that they were one of the two African nations to preserve their independence. If you're interested in the other one, it was a nation known as Liberia. It is on the coast of Eastern Africa, and that country was founded by freed African American slaves. So Liberia was kind of not to be touched by the Europeans. They were a sovereign nation founded by those freedmen and freed women. But let's get back to Ethiopia. Ethiopia had a king. His name was Menelik II. And he's going to work to modernize Ethiopia. And he'll do this by building the railroads. He'll also establish an alliance with Russia and acquire modern weapons from them. So that in 1896, in the Battle of Adwa, when the Italians roll in and think that they're going to take over Ethiopia like the British did in South Africa, the Menelik's just going to basically say, well, think again, we have rifles and cannons and a railroad too, and basically defeat the Italians. So that's what makes Ethiopia kind of special. They remained independent due to the actions of their King Menelik II, moving to modernize before the Europeans rolled in. So that's about it for today. I'll see you all in part 2, where we will cover imperialism in China and Southeast Asia and looking at that cartoon. China's not going to have the best time during imperialism. He looks like he's in trouble. So I will see you all in the near future. Take care. Bye.